Hello, everyone. You're watching the Bruno Galan talk show, and I'm here today with James Desborough, who is a writer and tabletop role-playing game designer, and also just game designer in general. How are you doing, James?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. What are you working on recently?
Just Whitechester all day, every day. that's what I'm doing when I'm well enough to.
Yes. On another channel, James and I already had a whole conversation about Whitechester, which I'll put a link down below for anyone who's interested. If you like our chat here, you can go check that out after. But I think so let's talk about it if you want. You had, so Whitechester was a crowd-funded tabletop role-playing game, and you had a health scare, right?
Yeah. It's funny because when I did the well, in hindsight, when I did the crowdfunder, I said that I have these health problems, but then I was talking about my mental health issues, depression, and so on that I suffer from, and I'd taken that into account. And then, just a few weeks into it, I had I don't know what you call it really, hypertensive attack. Nearly had a stroke. And so that knocked me out for a couple of weeks, and it's been hard going since. So I thought I'd accounted for my health, but then something else happened, because something always has to go wrong. So
of course.
Yeah.
And I remember it was really scary because at some point you were worried for your actual vision for your eyes, right?
Yeah, the way we found out was I went to the optician to get new glasses because I was having trouble seeing anyway, and they found a bunch of hemorrhages at the backs of my eyes. So my massively elevated blood pressure had been bursting the capillaries in my eyes. Then straight to hospital, all kinds of treatment, new medication. Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like, if you're really dealing like with depression, and then also you're open about it online, so you're immunocompromised. So also going to a hospital during COVID, I guess that was not the most relaxing thing on top of that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not exactly immunocompromised.
Okay.
I had really bad asthma as a child and a bit of lung damage. So anything that attacks the respiratory system is really bad for me. So
yeah. Yeah, I used to have a friend who was a smoker and work in what do you call it in English? Asbestos. You know, like when demolition, but in asbestos environments. And I did that for a few weeks. Like, so we had the masks and everything, and it was summer. Like, we were sweating bullets in there. So that's why I kind of mock every single person who complains about like us having to wear masks right now in COVID, because I was wearing like the full breathing mask apparatus. Like, it's like, I don't know, like rubber on your face in summer doing demolition for a few weeks. So anyone who complains about those masks, I'm like, you come on. Like, how soft are you?
Yeah, they don't mess around when it comes to asbestos.
Well, I mean, the rules in place don't mess around, but the people working there do mess around with those rules. And I took it very seriously because the way it works is that they're like microscopic little hooks, if you will. And when you breathe it in, it goes in your lungs and it stays there forever. So any amount of asbestos you breathe in will forever be in your lungs. That means they have some, because at some point I was like it was, and when I got there, it wasn't even for fun stuff. Like, you grab a hammer, you demolish a wall. I wasn't even there for fun stuff. The contract I was on was so crappy. I had two contracts. One was like scraping. Oh my god, I can't speak English today. Not tubes, but like the water pipes. What's wrong with me? So I was scraping pipes, because they have like product around and you have to scrape that. And then, so we're like up there in the pipes, like lying down there, like scraping. It's kind of sort of claustrophobic, and you have like your mask on, and you have your battery, which is also the ventilator, hooked to your mask. And what happened is the battery fell from my belt and pulled the mask down. So I was like, well, okay, I'll forever have some asbestos in my lungs now. Which one time is not the end of the world, but it's like, some people work there for years and decades. So I know that I have asbestos in me because they're like microscopic little hooks that just stay there. There's no way to get rid of them. And of course, when it accumulates, that's a problem for a lot of people. And they have, I don't know the word of sickness. There's a specific sickness for people with asbestos in their lungs.
Asbestosis, I think.
Oh, okay. Because it's amiante in French. It's amiante because I worked in the province of Quebec. And yeah. So I mean, I know I have some in my lungs. Not to it wasn't there very long. I don't think. I think I'll be okay. I wasn't a smoker. So yeah. But yeah, for people like that, I imagine it's also another thing. So what's new in the geek world? What do you want to talk about in geek news or anything else? This is a talk show. We don't have a specific thing to discuss.
Well, I'm open to talk about anything really, but I've mostly had my head down working on Whitechester. So it's really only been the kind of big scandals and things that have been directed at me that I've noticed. Otherwise, I've been working hard and.
Yeah, politically, you're a left anarchist, and so you're very anti-censorship. Like your stance is kind of like, even if you don't like something or someone, they shouldn't be censored. I think that's your stance, right?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I think the only
to a limit, you know, if it doesn't hurt other people. Yeah.
I think the only real justification for censorship is if something can cause harm, by which I mean like actual harm, like
encouraging people to do violence, for example.
Like encouraging violence or spreading vaccine disinformation, I would say rises to the level of harm, for example.
Interesting. We could talk about that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's not that many things I can think of that genuinely rise to the level of harm. I mean, look at the current Joe Rogan situation, right? It started out with him having people on his podcasts spreading vaccine disinformation. Mm-hmm. He's also had people on his podcast who've corrected him on some of these things. Yeah. So it's not all one-sided. So that to me rises to the level of the harm principle, and that's something that you are justified in potentially censoring. I would still prefer that we use good information to drown out the bad information. I always think more speech is a better solution, but I think you can justify that. Whereas now, because that didn't seem to take, they've dragged up all this stuff about him using the N-word. Mm-hmm. That to me is not something you should censor somebody for, because it doesn't directly cause harm. It cannot be attributed directly to causing harm.
Not in the context he was in it. Yeah, I mean, it certainly can lead people to be offended, which I understand, but not harm. Because one important thing is, I think the N-word is kind of like almost like an IQ test for white people to see, are you able to just stay out of trouble easily by using this replacement word that's not going to get you in trouble? You can still talk about that word. You just say N-word instead, and you don't get in trouble. So it's almost like this IQ test in like social survival or whatever you want to call it. Like,
yeah, but it's weird because the rules around it don't stay the same. So
I know, and you know the thing that's interesting though, it's so he apologized, and then it's one of those things where like, okay, I have this first take, but a caveat actually, because I think people are focusing on the wrong thing. So first of all, he apologized for using the word. And I think it's a debate to be had, but personally, I never use it. Even black friends who wanted to make me happy and called me that. Actually, you know what? I'm not comfortable with you calling me that. I understand it was a nice gesture to make me feel included, but actually, I'm fine. There's no need for that. And also, like, wigga is like the most like friendly, condescending thing ever. It's so funny to me as a word. Again, I wouldn't want it used, but it's like this like. I'll include you. It just can include you that way. But look, we'll do this. It's like the big brother who gives the little brother the controller for Nintendo that's not even plugged.
Well, so. I don't know what it's like where you are, but here, wig has always been a term of derision. You know, pretty fly for a white guy, sort of thing.
Well, I just read it online. No one ever pulled it on me. No one pulled it on me. It's kind of funny because there's that. So people are angry because he used the word, but he was always using it in the context where he was talking about the word, which, you have Samuel L. Jackson, who in an interview gave a hard time to an interviewer during the time of Django Unchained, Samuel Jackson was like, "What word? What N-word? Nurse?" Like, he was telling the guy, just say the word. And the white interviewer didn't want to, and then they had to skip the question. Samuel was like, "Well, I'm not going to answer the question." So you have like, and actually some black people are like, "Just say the word." And you have Childish Gambino, whose actual actor name, even though I started watching him in Community, I'm forgetting his actual name. This Childish Gambino is so catchy, I just replaced that in my head. But even he was like, he made a sketch like, just start using the word, and he's like, we'll lose a few of you along the way. But you know, so I mean, it's not even like this universal understanding. I think it's a majority understanding that, you know, us white people are not supposed to use it because there's a whole context. And you know what, like I don't. The reason why I don't worry about it, just use N-word, is because whatever I need to say about the word, I can just say N-word instead, and we can discuss it, and it's not going to offend anyone because we're being respectful to that rule. And if it was a thing where I don't have any way to discuss it, maybe I would have an issue with not saying it. But I have this alternative, so I why would I get in trouble to say what I can say otherwise? You know, there's no point. It's social suicide. It's like what?
Yeah. I'll use it if I'm discussing the issue, or if I'm doing a video or something, I'll cut in an actor saying it or something, or South Park saying it.
Yeah, that
seems to work. But there's just no, there are no hard and fast rules, and it's different inside and outside America. It doesn't have the same power outside of America. I don't think it's still a bad word.
I've known a black guy who got super angry at another black guy for saying it. Like the guy showed up and said it in a very affectionate, friendly way, and the guy knew still got like super like almost ready to fight him. Yeah. So you know, there's a joke I had where two black guys like went and said it to each other, like, "Hey, what's up?" And this girl was also black, actually took them to HR because she heard it. So it's no one agrees, and so I don't want to use it because I like words that mean something that everyone can agree on. You know.
I always think back to Jackie Chan in Rush Hour. What's up, mate?
Oh my god, that was so funny. That was so. Do you think they could make that joke these days?
I don't
know. Maybe because
he's
Asian, it would fly.
Yeah, the whole point is that he's a fish out of water, and the other guy tells
James,
him.
It's not about context. I wasn't talking about their context for this joke. I'm saying, could they do it these days? I think because he's not white, maybe it could fly. Although in Peacemaker, they're starting to make some jokes again, which I'm not even sure I like. But anyway. I like Peacemaker, but I don't like those jokes. Anyway,
it always reminds me, though, also of ages and ages ago, the comedian David Baddiel did this weird show. I've never been able to track it down again, but it was just different people would rant on different topics, and he did this one about the C word, which isn't particularly offensive in English. It's we use it like
only the most fragile people would have an issue.
But
there's lots of fragile people these days.
Yeah, so what is it about the word? Is it the sound? Then why aren't you offended by punt, right? Or is it the meaning? So why aren't you offended by vagina?
The thing is the intensity with which it's said. They're like, I think people say it comes like from I don't know.
I suppose.
Like when I want to swear, I like to swear in Spanish. You know, it's more guttural. There's something about it. Yeah, but you know the part where I was actually super offended, it wasn't even like the whole like going to movies and comparing it to Planet of the Apes, because he explained that one. And so I think when you're gonna talk for hours and hours and hours for years, sometimes you're gonna express yourself in a way that the one part where I was legit offended by him, and I can't listen to him during COVID because I'm a fan of mixed martial arts, so I used to really like enjoy listening to his podcast. And I think there's something to be said for, and I always said there's room for different kinds of men. You can have very effeminate men, and they have their place in society, and every type of man has their place. But sometimes it, as a traditional masculine man, I guess it felt good to hear about some stuff that was like, like just, so I used to like his podcast, but with the whole COVID disinformation, kind of got, especially because what annoyed me in the martial arts community is a lot of people, instead of having this noble aspect of martial artists are supposed to protect the weak if it comes to like a bully or a bad guy, suddenly became like they were taking COVID like the challenger. Like, I'm afraid of COVID. Like, what is this? But anyway, which I digress. But the part that I've never heard that before. And it's from early on in the show, and he told this mixed guest who was half black, half white. Oh, you have the best of both worlds, and then he goes into this kind of eugenics kind of sounding thing where like the physicality of one and the mentality of the other, and I was like, oh, that's actually bad. There's no excuse for that one. And in his apology, he didn't even acknowledge that one, which told me a lot. I was like, no, that was years ago. People change, but the fact that in his apology he didn't mention that one, that kind of bugged me. But again,
yeah.
I can just say I don't like his opinions without having to rant about canceling the man. Although you seem to think that for the COVID stuff, maybe he should. Was that your stance? Or?
I regard that as a situation in which censorship is justified, but okay. I think there are better ways to deal with the problem.
Well, he himself said that when they're going to bring up people with contrarian ideas, there's going to be like a disclaimer at the beginning. And that he's going to try to make it so his guests are more back-to-back. If one has a differing opinion, he's going to invite someone with the other opinion. One part where, even before this whole thing that I found from years ago happened, the compilation of the N-word, even before then, one part where I really lost a lot of respect for him was very recently when, because I always thought he was this objective guy, that he'd say stuff that he thought that maybe other people didn't agree to, but he would be objective when presented with information. That was the face he portrayed, right? And he would always talk about how people can't like accept information when given it. So I always thought of him as this objective guy. But then recently, I forgot the guest, sadly, but a guest was like, no, actually, you're wrong about this thing about the vaccines. And they looked it up, and Rogan was wrong. But then he goes, but where do they get this information? It's like, oh no, like, he's really not the guy he was portraying to be himself to be, which I guess is true of all of us on some level. But, yeah.
If I remember right, at the end of that, he did basically change his mind after he had his face rubbed in it. But I mean, I'm not a Joe bro. I only watch him when there's something or someone interesting. But what I think his strength, what I think his strength is that he's not that clever, really, but he's quite open-minded and he'll have the conversation. And because he's not that clever, the guest, even if it's like a professor or something, brings it down to a level that anybody can understand, even if they disagree with it. But the idea that Rogan is right-wing just seems stupid. And I saw this list online of this many left-wing guests, this many right-wing guests, and on the right-wing side they had people like Steven Pinker, who is not remotely right-wing, or Sam Harris, who is not remotely right-wing, and several of these names that they put in the right-wing tally were nowhere near right-wing in their beliefs. A bit contrarian in one area here and there, but not right-wing.
Well, I think what happens is when someone is an extremist on the far left or right, anyone who's not on their extreme will be seen as the other extreme. So you and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that also applies to you. You and I have both been online called both a fascist and a communist, or maybe not fascist, but like something along those lines, whatever extreme right they happen to choose, and then also a communist. So it's like, okay, how can we be? Obviously, I think there's a lot more centrism in the actual real world than the people who go online to go accusing people. And I mean, they can't comprehend that, like.
Part of it, I think, is that I studied politics, so I have a slightly more sort of stepped back view of what constitutes left and right wing. Right?
How dare you be objective these days?
So even if I am way off to the sort of left libertarian side of things, I can still gauge where someone is on the scale, left to right. Even if I don't agree with them, or I do agree with them, I can still position them fairly accurately. So
sorry.
Just saying, maybe that's the problem.
I know that I've been put on a block list recently. I was really confused, and then I was like, and I would see the people who blocked me, and they like a lot of them happen to be trans or to declare themselves a trans ally, which confused the hell out of me. I was like, how can I be on that block list? Is an association somewhere? And then because you were even retweeting people that I was blocked from. I was like, because you're kind of a controversial figure. So I was like, how can I be blocked from certain people that not even James is blocked from? Well, how did that happen? And I messaged you. I was asking you, like, what do you think? And you know me. and you were like, did you talk about sports? I was like, that's what it is. I had one conversation, and online. And the thing is that even in that conversation, I actually acknowledged a lot of stuff. Like during the conversation, I was acknowledging a lot of points brought to me, acknowledging them. And even then, someone went like, "Bad guy," because I was talking about the whole trans athletes and mixed martial arts specifically. Like, I don't even. The thing is, I try not to overstep in things that are not of my understanding, or that I don't pretend to feign interest in things that I was not interested in before. So, like, I'm not someone who's interested in swimming. So I'm not suddenly, just because there's a hot topic and I have this opinion, I'm not gonna step in like, I have an opinion on this, which I wasn't interested in yesterday. Like, it's not my style. I try to stay in my lane, if you will. Doesn't mean I can talk about things, but if I'm gonna go public about it, like, it better be something in my lane. It's kind of my stance. Yeah. Well, it's not a hard stance, but a guideline. And when it comes to combat sports, like the problem is that, and I stick to my stuff. I don't wanna deal with other sports. It's not an identity thing. It's a physical thing. It really is. And when I see bad takes, like, like the transphobes find stuff like bone structure, which is whatever. In fighting, it's not whatever. Oh my God, leverage for striking and grappling is a big deal. Reach. And and so the thing is that the example I could give, if anyone listened, when I have the conversation, which I try not to have too often, but I'm talking to you, and it's like the controversial stuff just comes out when I talk to you. It comes out like the thing is that it's not an identity thing, because a lightweight man fighting at 155 pounds is no less of a man than the heavyweight champion of the world. It's not, we have weight classes in the sport for a reason. This is a sport. That's my point. I don't want to talk about our sports. Our sport has differentiated in sex and weight class, not just in sex. So it's not about identity, because it's about the physical aspects. And that's the point that I try to make, which it pisses me off that people who don't know anything about fighting come and give their opinion based on these thoughts they have, but they actually don't stick to their lane in a way. I'm sorry to say. They just chose this battle because it kind of has this ideological thing they like about having this battle, but they don't actually know the details. And, like the lightweight champion of the world is no less of a man than the heavyweight champion of the world. They're just in different weight classes for very clear reasons. And yes, some MMA fights are open weight, and the both fighters accept they're going to fight at open weight, and that's on them. And the same way that, anyway, and in the argument I had, actually, someone brought this up to me where I acknowledged my, where I might have been a bit off and wrong, because I was saying, it's not transphobic to say this, because also for trans men, how are they ever going to be the champion of the world? And they're, and then the person said, well, who are you to speak for trans men what they want? And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like, and I've tried to speak to trans men fighters since then. I was never able to get an interview, but I'm really interested in that conversation, because they're accepting to fight at a disadvantage. But also, how else are they going to fight, And there is examples like Nick Newell, who fights and has one arm is only a partial arm. So he fights with an arm and a half. So he can elbow on both sides, but he can't punch on both sides. However, the funny thing is, just as a side note, he got used to his handicap. And what he does is he sinks in his part of an arm for rear naked choke, and the person has nothing to grab on. So he made it work for him. The other thing, of course, is that people can exploit the more open side in fighting. Like you can play luck. I forget which arm it is, actually. But the thing is that, like, people don't have a forearm to grab onto. So the choke is actually, like, when it sets in, it's like you're done. So that's interesting. But so these conversations, I think, are important. But the problem is that if you want to have them purely on the sports side, too many people are willing and ready to call you a bad person and ignore the physical things and just make it ideological. But it's not an ideology of identity, because, again, lightweight and heavyweight men, no one is saying the lightweight, like, no one's going to say that people like Tony Ferguson, I know these names might not mean anything to you, is less of a man than Francis Ngannou. No one's going to say that, so, yeah. And also, I want to acknowledge, ever since with people who are open about having these conversations, the funny thing that happened is I actually learned some stuff. Go figure, if instead of insulting someone, you have a conversation with them, someone pointed out, what do trans men want? Like, okay, that's a good point. Who am I to speak for them? Maybe they want to fight, cisgender men. And then I was, and another thing is, someone brought up, like, this whole idea of, like, well, let them fight each other, do you think there's enough of them to even make a league or something? I was like, oh, that's another good point. So these are conversations to be had where if you actually have them instead of attacking people and thinking the worst of them right away, I learned stuff to people who took the time to talk to me. So
yeah. The latest thing I've heard suggested is that you have just an open category and a protected women's category. So anyone can fight or swim or do whatever in the open category, but only women in the women's category. I don't know that that's entirely fair, but...
You know, there's a precedent to that, in that, again, this is not really sport I'm interested in, but I listened to this guy this reporter who talks about MMA a lot, really objective guy, who's called Luke Thomas. And he's really interested in the whole controversy. I mean, he kind of reminds me of you in a way that he really likes to study controversies and get down and dirty and go with opinions that maybe not everyone agrees to at the surface level, but then if they actually listen to what he has to say. But of course, he is in a sport where people are a lot more open-minded about controversial stuff. So, so he has this whole thing about like how he thinks that controlling steroids in sports is this lost cause, which is just affecting fighters negatively. And basically, fighters with more money to spend on steroids that will hide them better have this advantage. And so it's a whole debate. I think that's what he was saying. I might get it wrong. But what apparently in weightlifting, which he's also a fan of, you have some competitions which are no testing. You do whatever you want, whatever it takes for you to lift this weight, this bar here, you do your thing and just lift it. And then there's specifically no steroid competitions. And the son of this very famous guy, he was like this motivator and used to break records in weightlifting of some sort. Again, weightlifting is not my sport, but C.T. Fletcher, like he's like, if you need to work out, I know sometimes you work out, I think if you need to work out, just listen to C.T. Fletcher, like scream motivational stuff. It's not like cheesy, it's just like raw screaming and like, you will finish your motherfucker. Like, like you just get the guy has something about it, he gets you pumped up. And his son competes in non-steroid. Because C.T. Fletcher had a heart attack, and I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the fact that his son is so adamant about not using steroids, and his dad had a heart issue, and I don't know what happened there. But so in weightlifting, they do have like a category. This is do whatever you want, and this is you're gonna be monitored if you take steroids or not. That could be a way to do it. As long as they don't change it in like midway, because what I was thinking is in fighting, in a way you could say, well, everyone has to sign the contract, I accept this fight or not. But then you have the draconian contract measures in most organizations where people have to, if they don't accept the fight, their contract is prolonged. It's very draconian, it's very unfair. And then you have the thing, well, what if this person with, yes, a physical advantage becomes champion? Then like no one has a choice. If you want to be champion, you have to face this person. So maybe like you said, but then I think an organization won't want to do that because they'd be considered the transphobe organization.
Yeah. And in a lot of competitions, it's basically going to be unfair. I mean, one idea I had was to have, similar to how you have in fighting, heavyweight, middleweight, lightweight, and so on. You just have different categories in sports and then have them open and you just fall into your category. But then in most sports, the top categories are just going to be dominated by biological men.
Yes.
So yeah, it doesn't actually.
Not only that.
Solve the problem.
When you suggested that idea online, I had a big issue with it by the pure, simply because, let's say someone knows they cannot get to the top, and they can't get to the second tier either. But they belong to the second tier. They just want to be the top dog in the second tier. They just have to not do as much as they could, get into third tier and win something in third tier, because maybe they consider better to win something, even if it's in a lesser tier, than not win anything in an upper tier. So that was something that I found like it would be very easy for people to, for example, again, athletes, when they go to the Olympics, all of them know they're not going to win. So they just go there because it's going to be fun. They're going to have sex with lots of other athletes from other countries, and they're going to be able to eat McDonald's for those who have countries where they don't allow McDonald's. So, they're supposed to win the Olympics, but they're eating McDonald's in the food courts. So, because they know they're not going to win. They're just there to have fun.
So basically, there's no good solution.
I think there's a. I mean, I like your idea, and not the latest one. I think is very flawed, and but the previous one where the same way weightlifters have categories with, because the reality is, you can't. I don't think there's enough trans athletes to have a league of their own, and even then, maybe this is not something that matters in the sense of the sport itself, but maybe also they would feel very excluded. I don't think it's fair to make racial like, some of them like kind of compare with racial segregation. I don't think it's anywhere near that. I don't think it's the same thing. But and of course, I think most trans people who compare it like that are white. I've never seen a trans people of color make that comparison. So,
well, it's interesting you bring up the racial thing, because people from a very particular genetic background tends to win sprint. So the West Indian, West African, I think, descent, because they have more of the faster twitch muscles.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I don't look. Again, I'm not even gonna like sprint.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that in fighting you have so many other factors that it's not really an issue.
In sprinting, you basically, you have to go 100 meters as fast as possible, and for whatever reason, their genetic background tends to have more of that. Now, this isn't to say that race differences are really meaningful or particularly scientific. Here, we're talking about an Olympic level where the tiniest difference, makes all the difference. It's not anything that would ever come up in normal life, but people with that heritage tend to dominate that particular sport, and there isn't really anything you can do to catch up. Though it's interesting that there's some thought that Paralympic sprinting will soon be faster than able-bodied sprinting
because of the springs,
the blades. Yeah, because they're the blades and they have less body weight.
Yeah.
So there's so what do we do then? Do we let them compete with the other sprinters? But then is that an unfair advantage?
No, I think you just keep it as it is. It's fine. And then people want to see the fastest people around. Actually, go watch the Paralympics.
But we can just have a completely unlimited category where people can take all the steroids they want, implant cybernetics, take drugs, whatever. How far can a human body go before it explodes? Let's find out.
Sometimes I do wonder about like cyberpunk MMA. I do think about that sometimes, because of course I do. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of in the William Gibson novels. The main love interest in Neuromancer, I forgot her name, the one with the visor.
Molly Millions.
In the third book, Mona Lisa Overdrive was the third and final book of that trilogy, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, the Count Zero and then Mona Lisa Overdrive. Okay. Yeah. Which, of course, as I say that, suddenly my brain goes from that song in the Matrix Reloaded. But they actually mentioned that when she was in Japan, I think she was in underground fights against other people with cybernetics, but she got messed up, so that's why she becomes a bodyguard to this girl. I think that was in that one, or am I confusing it with Idoru, which also had, I think, a bodyguard, female bodyguard to a girl? I'm confusing the novels, maybe. I don't know anymore.
It's been a long time since I read them, so
yeah,
I can't help you out. You're on your own.
I thought I thought well, people you would be like.
Yeah, it's just been a long time since I read it.
They didn't mention like some underground fighting with cybernetics or something.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Yeah.
But then what do you allow then? It's yeah.
Well, apparently the Yakuza in Japan would allow MMA fights where like you could bite, eye gouge, and kick in the balls and all that. Which even in Brazil, Vale Tudo, they would allow those things. But the reason why it was forbidden, because contrary to what really out of shape people want to believe when they talk about fighting and they think that they don't need to get in shape and learn how to fight properly, putting your finger in someone's eye is not ending the fight. You might do lasting damage after the fact. So if you want to be bitter about losing, go ahead. But they're not fight enders. So what happened is the amount of long-lasting damage for the very little change it made in the actual fight was not worth it. And that happened recently, where in female fighting, like this this girl was in a rear naked choke, and she went and put her thumb in the other girl's eye, and she still choked her unconscious before the ref could like. So you know, it's kind of like this whole thing of out of shape people who don't want to know how to really learn to fight. Oh, I just spoke them in the eye. Yeah, well, first of all, against a trained fighter, good luck getting there. But even if you did, it's not what you think it's. It's not going to be what you think it is.
Yeah.
I was watching Reacher from Prime Video yesterday, and he does shove his whole thumb in someone's eye. It was like, okay, to that level it would work, but Reacher's this massive guy, like different rules, I guess, and even in his fiction, I don't know how easy it would be.
I thought that might appeal to you because it's quite pulpy, that series.
Oh man, I actually, the thing is that I started reading the first novel, and then my son was born like almost 2 years ago, and then it's kind of like I was reading in slow motion and everything. I normally would read many books at once, so it's kind of like, and then I moved, so it's somewhere in my boxes, and now the show came on, and like, I guess I'll know what happens before even finishing the first book. I do like Reacher. I do like Reacher. I like, how can I explain? I do like stories that deconstruct the hero, but I also like stories where the hero is straightforward. I like both. And what I don't like, however, is when you take a hero who was the traditional hero and you deconstruct him without using an ex-spy. What I mean by that is, for example, Watchmen, it's fine to do that to his characters because they were ex-spies of Carlton Comics characters. But if Alan Moore had actually taken Captain Atom instead of creating Dr. Manhattan, if, you know, all those things. No, I'm not going to pretend I'm like this huge fan of the Carlton characters that DC bought, but my point is kind of, for example, I don't like The Last Jedi. But if Rian Johnson had made a movie that was kind of like this, you understand it's supposed to be kind of a Luke Skywalker type, and then he does that with his story, then it's fine. But to grab the actual Luke Skywalker, I don't like. I like when people grab this like kind of like Superman sort of character, like in The Boys or whatever, and you can do whatever you want with it. But to
do it with actual Superman would be.
Then you should, like, you know, then you should stick to what made Superman work for so long, because you know, like, so I do think there's room for deconstruction stories, but I don't think you should mess with the actual character when you do that. Unless you're very clever about it, which no one is 99% of the time.
Yeah, when Frank Miller gave his sort of treatment to Batman and Superman, that worked there, having Superman as this sort of tool of American imperialism. But I think that's because he set it so far in the future of what was already happening that you could kind of see how over time that could happen, how Superman could be corrupted in the same way people would say America had been corrupted. So it worked because he had that distance. It felt like a different universe almost.
Well, it was a different universe because in the main continuity, I don't think that would have been acceptable for Superman to do that.
Yeah, though a lot of the ideas have since been worked into mainstream Batman and Superman.
Yeah, except for Superman, he's if anything, what happened to him in it's kind of interesting. Dark Knight Returns influenced Batman and Superman in very different ways. It influenced Batman in making him darker, and to the point where now I would find that the Batman in the Dark Knight Returns, if anything, is not as strong-willed as the one in the main canon now, in the sense that the one in the main canon would never quit. It's to that point now. I can't even imagine a Batman who quits. But the Superman, for Superman, what happened was, in a way, because Frank Miller kind of took this cheesy way that everyone saw him, and maybe up to a point he was written like that, but even at the time that he did Dark Knight Returns, Superman wasn't written like that anymore. He was taking like the Superman from maybe the 60s or something, I don't know. And but it kind of made people who like Superman and Superman writers want to say, well, that's not it. That's not what he would do, you know. So I think it's kind of funny how it kind of took them in different directions. It really did define Batman and Superman going forward. But what happens is, I think that was a good approach in the sense that it wasn't the main canon. It's not like what you do to Luke Skywalker, this is the actual canon of what happens to Luke. That's the problem. If you do it in this isolated universe, you can try stuff, and then maybe something comes out, and then again, the deconstruction I was talking about. So maybe something comes out where it's either, oh, that's really it, or oh, that's not it at all. And in a way, Star Wars, what they're doing with Mandalorian, showing Luke Skywalker being this noble hero who actually does stuff, and is dignified and all that, it's kind of like this reaction to this deconstruction that didn't work, except it's on the same canon now.
Yeah.
So that's more iffy, but yeah.
Grant Morrison argues in his book Super Gods that superheroes are modern mythology.
Yes.
That they embody important archetypes to us. So when you
it's their book. He's no, he wow. They them now for Grant Morrison.
Is it?
Yeah. Apparently, yeah. So
okay. Well, first I've read about it.
Supposed to say their book. Yeah.
Which is weird because I follow him quite a lot.
You say it however you want. I'm just letting you know.
Okay. I can neither confirm nor deny.
What you want with the information.
Okay, but so what was I saying? Okay, so he's I'm gonna say he. It's too ingrained at the moment. So he argues, and that's how he identified at the time in his book Super Gods, that
when he wrote Super Gods, it was he.
Yeah. That they are archetypes in the same way that the Greek gods and the Greek demigods and so on were archetypes of their times. So really, if you are deconstructing an archetype, then it's no longer the archetype. And I think that explains why there is so much failure associated with this kind of deconstruction and reconstruction of characters that has gone on. When Morrison got his hands on Superman, he wrote a much more traditional Boy Scout Superman, which isn't what you would normally expect from Morrison, because he's normally pretty off the wall and explores odd things. But I think he really understands the power and importance of the archetype in those kind of settings. Yeah. Then Warren Ellis, when he was writing The Authority, he basically created a new pantheon like the Justice League, I guess, called The Authority. And many of the archetypes used in that are the same. Like the Midnighter is obviously Batman. Yeah.
Apollo, Superman.
Yeah, and they're lovers. They're gay lovers, which is kind of perfect in a way. So.
It always made me angry how people who ship Batman Superman always ignore Midnighter and Apollo. Yeah. And even like the current Superman son, who's bisexual, John Kent, and I'm really happy that a lot of people have this new hero they can look to. But it also angers me a little bit they ignored Apollo and Midnighter all this time. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. But basically, that's two different approaches to the same thing. They're both approaching the same archetypes. Morrison is seeking to kind of shore up and re-embody the archetype in its pure form. Ellis is taking the archetypes and putting a different spin on them, which, keeping within the theme of super gods, that's like how, the Greeks and Romans essentially had the same gods that were interchangeable. And then the Norse pantheon has, similar gods that you could interchange. And there's this whole kind of wave of syncretic Romano-Germanic religion all across Europe with little differences. It's almost like an evolutionary diagram of a ring species. You can kind of pick out what elements traveled and what ones didn't, and how they bound together. So I think those are two valid approaches to the same thing. But if Ellis had done The Authority using the actual Justice League, but made Superman and Batman gay for each other, and it just wouldn't have worked.
No, it
but so you can tap into the same archetypes and do different interpretations and spins on them, but you still have to keep them kind of separate.
What I think works, because what happens is very often, I think the failure in a lot of writers is that when they want to approach these subject matters with classic characters, they think they need to change the character to approach the subject matter. But the stories that work the most, for example, let's keep to Superman. It's one story that was just two issues, and people still refer to it this day, was what's so funny about truth, justice, and the American way. And that got turned into a cartoon, Superman versus the Elite. And that was basically like this hardcore, modern, anti-hero group kind of mocking Superman for being this traditional hero. And then at the end, it just reinforces why Superman is like that. Instead of oh, see the hypocrisy of Superman, let's deconstruct him. No, it celebrates like, yeah, I am like this. I have my reason for being like this, and you're actually not tougher for having this behavior. And it shows how Superman's actually really freaking tough and has this behavior to him, which is heroic and dignified. And it's the same thing with All-Star Superman, which you mentioned, where Superman was just this kind, benevolent being, and none of it made him weaker. And I like that at the end of that story, Lex Luthor, when he has all of Superman's powers, what happens to him is he kind of crumbles under the pressure of realizing everything that Superman can see and what that means. And I don't want to spoil it too much, I guess, in a way, but and a man like Luthor just crumbles. He can't handle what Superman sees, and I love that. And it's kind of like, of course, Superman would be kind when he has all of this context, like all of, and to me, that's when you approach it. Man of Steel and Captain America: Civil War in movies came out kind of around the same time, and I was thinking, in Captain America: Civil War, Captain America deals with government corruption. He deals with a lot of disillusionment and all that, but he remains this. Sorry, not Civil War, the Winter Soldier. Yeah, it was the Winter Soldier around the same time. I'm sorry. So in the word Winter Soldier, like, you have all these dark themes, and yet Captain America remains steadfastly the same guy through it. Whereas in Man of Steel, Superman's bent over backwards to become like this kind of like Batman with powers. Yeah. It was just this example. And then when Batman v Superman happened, you're like, why are they fighting? They're the same guy. And like Snyder is clumsily quoting Dark Knight Returns without any of the context that made Dark Knight Returns make sense. Yeah, it's like they're the same guy. And then
Batman
in
that whole arc made a better Luthor than Luthor did. Because he had the same fears as Luthor. He was projecting, oh my God, what would a
I never thought of it this way. You're right. Oh my God, you're right. That's crazy. And then at the same time, you have Daredevil season 2 with Daredevil going up against the Punisher, and they're clashing philosophies. And as dark as Daredevil was, he wasn't killing people. And then I was like, again, this is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And it was dark, like it wasn't like kid friendly, but you still had this hero who didn't kill. And it's just again, like and Zack Snyder said that he had just done Watchmen and he was in this deconstruction mode, and of course Dark Knight made lots of money. So, and it's just like, I don't know, like people really need to realize that something that has been around for so long has been there for a reason. And when they try to, I realize when they try to reinvent Superman in clumsy ways, like making him, like giving him this electric suit and whatever in the 90s, killing him was a good move. Yeah, killing him was a good move because it reminds you, oh yeah, it leaves a gap, doesn't it? And then you have these characters trying to be him and not being him. That was a good move. When Batman got his back broken in the 90s, got replaced by Jean-Paul Valley, Azrael, that was a good move because it reminds you, oh yeah, maybe it's not so cool to have this Batman who's acting like the Punisher. Maybe that wasn't that cool after all. That he's in this 90s armor and shooting at people with his gauntlets, and maybe we want to have Bruce Wayne back. So it's kind of like, there's ways to tell some stories, but if you have the skill to understand the character, the stories that either you do something like that where you remind people like why they would miss that character, or you remind them why the character is so freaking amazing by just showing it. Also Superman. There's those two methods where you can play a lot with that, or you go like you said, the Authority, where you just take the X-Spies of the characters. And
I mean, Marvel's not been quite as good at doing that with its characters, killing them off and then bringing them back in a satisfying way. So they had Captain America killed off at one point, but they didn't let him stay dead long enough for it to.
When Bucky replaced him, the Winter Soldier replaced him, and then for a while, I don't remember why he was gone. Oh yeah, he got old. They couldn't kill him again because that would be, so he got old, and then it was Falcon who replaced him. And by the way, for the cinematic universe, I'm actually all for those characters being replaced because you can't keep the actors around forever. So if you want to not reboot and keep the same continuity for the cinematic universe, I'm perfectly fine with them replacing those characters. For the comics,
Yeah, I'm a little concerned in the films because I mean the comics haven't been doing well, and the changes that they've made and the new versions of the characters haven't done as well in the comics, like Ironheart and all of these other sort of reskinned characters that they put in. But they seem to be moving the movies along that same arc, and I think they're gonna. I mean, they already are. They're running out of steam, running out of interest. People aren't along for the ride so much anymore.
I didn't even watch Eternals. It's on Disney Plus, so
I haven't watched it yet either.
I didn't. I enjoyed Shang-Chi. I actually enjoyed it.
Shang-Chi was okay.
Yeah. I mean, no, it didn't fall on my ass or anything. I just liked it. I'm looking forward to Moon Knight. Then what else?
Yeah, the TV series, like we were saying, they can be a bit more experimental, and that makes them a bit more.
WandaVision was really interesting. Yeah, WandaVision was really interesting.
I didn't like the last couple of episodes, but up until then, I was like, this is cool.
But at least I appreciate that they tried it. And the only thing I was dissatisfied at the end was that, and this is gonna sound like I'm gonna be the most simpleton guy ever, but I have my reason for saying this. Like, it wasn't well explained enough, which I'll sometimes complain that some things are too explained. But in this case, at the end, when she's in the cabin and you have her in the front, so is that an illusion? Like, what's going on exactly? Like, and bear in mind, again, I do think sometimes some movies, like, they give you a flashback of the scene from 10 minutes ago in case you forgot, and like, okay, that's too explained. Like, I have my moments where I'll say this, but that ending was kind of like, well, what's going on exactly? And okay, it might be a cliffhanger, but if you're doing it to a cliffhanger that the movie is going to come out in 3 years, that's not the right move. And if it's a cliffhanger to a movie coming out in 3 months, okay.
Yeah.
So it's But anyway,
if you're left hanging on a cliff for 3 years, you're going to fall off. Basically.
that's a very nice metaphor.
I quite liked Loki. That was quite good.
I actually didn't.
No,
I didn't, because it took the focus away from Loki. I was following Sylvie. Sylvie, was it? The Enchantress, which they didn't make the Enchantress, but they made her Loki. And was that a threat to Hiddleston? We can replace you. She can be Loki. Was that it? I don't know.
Maybe. Richard E. Grant was magnificent, though.
Yeah, that was so cool. Like the classic Loki. Yeah, and what was it? Glorious Purpose.
Yes.
So at the end, he's like glorious. Okay, okay. Loki was a TV show that I was okay with it, and it certainly had scenes that I liked, but I just don't like when this character comes in and sabotages the main character, makes him look or her like a doofus. So, which was actually why I liked. Oh, Black Widow, I liked, because the new Black Widow didn't make the old Black Widow look bad.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard people say that about the Hawkeye series, that she doesn't overshadow him, and he's still.
Yeah, it's true. Cool. Yeah, I haven't finished it yet because there's so much stuff to watch. I can't even keep up anymore. But that was something I also liked, where the new character is interesting. Like they show the new character is cool, but it doesn't come at the cost of the old character, which is something Cobra Kai figured out. And actually, Cobra Kai is an interesting case because they do deconstruct, but they deconstruct with what we already actually saw before. That's the interesting part. This adds a new layer now to this conversation. I don't know if you watched Cobra Kai.
I did. I haven't watched the newest series.
Okay, well, I'm not going to give spoilers to that. I'm just going to talk in general why it works, even though they deconstruct characters who already existed. It's because normally when people deconstruct, they just like pull stuff out of their ass, and that's something that was never there before. Like the way Luke is in The Last Jedi, he's gonna kill his nephew because he's scared. Dude, you saved Darth Vader from the dark side, and now you're scared of your nephew. So it just didn't fit with the established character. However, in Cobra Kai, what they do is they like we've all seen the YouTube video, like Daniel was the real bully in Karate Kid, it's kind of funny. And now when I watched it, I was like, that's a good point. It takes some elements out for the joke to work, but it's not like you can see the argument, and that in itself is interesting to discuss. And so what I liked about Cobra Kai is that everything that they grab about character flaws, about deconstructing, about going, hey, you know what, maybe Daniel isn't so pure and perfect after all, is all based on stuff that happened. They even show you in flashbacks, like, this is not something we made up of the character. This is just the character as he always was. You just didn't pay attention to this.
Yeah.
which they tried to do at the end of Game of Thrones with Daenerys, and it didn't work. Like, oh, she hung all the slavers. Like, yeah, but they were slavers.
Yeah.
So
they needed another season to build her up as being a villain.
I don't think Martin would agree. I'm joking. He would totally like. Martin has complained about that in so many places. Yeah. But the construction works if you can actually show the receipts.
Yeah, Cobra Kai is like Dark Knight, right? There's a time gap, and you can believe the changes in the characters over time. Like Daniel is successful, but he's not that successful, and he still sees himself as a victim all the time. Right?
Which is interesting. It's just interesting to talk about, seeing yourself that way all the time, where he becomes the bully through seeing himself as a victim very often.
Yeah. Whereas the bully, he's still obsessed by the past. But he's beaten down on his luck, but he finds a way out of that. So, but you've had that time difference. But I don't.
Yeah.
If you think back to your own schooling, I bet if you sort of imagine the kids you knew back then, you probably got a fairly good idea where they ended up in life. Yeah, fairly accurately.
Who knows? I don't know. The thing about me is, I'm not even joking. I barely remember anyone from high school. Just the friends I had and their names and all that, like, I don't really remember them. It's like just information that I dismissed over the years that wasn't interesting to me. What can I say? I have very selective memory.
I was bullied a lot in school, so I remember those faces.
It was interesting. I do remember my bullies a little bit, but my way of being bullied was interesting. Where I'm always kind of like this weird guy who's never on one full side. I have these jock aspects to me and this nerd aspect to me, which I'm sure you know by now. And the same way a geek can go about his D&D character doesn't take me off to go into MMA, as we've seen in this video twice or thrice. But what's interesting about me in high school, I was this hyperactive mess. I was even running in the hallways. I couldn't not run when I was going somewhere. So I was getting bullied, but never physically. Because if someone tried to bully me physically, then I would punch them. Yeah. And that's because my mom had told me, you fight words with words, but if someone gets physical, you can defend yourself. And in retrospect, I wish I had just been in a mode of, like, if someone bothers me continuously, I'm going to put, like, words with words at first, but if it keeps going, I'll just punch them. And, after I punch someone, I would always get this, like, 1 week of being left alone. But then they kind of like test out the waters. Okay, he's allowing this. I'm gonna, so they knew where the limit was with me. And I always had this annoying thing when I punched a bully, like, then all the other nerds would come see me, and I didn't want anything to do with them because they were weak. Because they, like when bullies tried sometimes to be friendly with me to see if I would be like this excited little, like, oh, you're being friendly with me. I was like, dude, leave me alone. You're my enemy. Leave me alone. And they'll be like, oh, shit, didn't work. Like, they'll look all confused. Because with our nerds, like, if they were friendly, like, those nerds were all happy. Like, oh, they're being friendly with me. They're popular kids or whatever. And I was like, no, dude, leave me alone. And if you touch me, I'll punch you. So it was kind of like they knew where the line was where it could bother me. But I kind of always despised the other bullied kids. Not out of a sense of, like, self-hatred, because I was also... No, just because they had no principles. They were desperate for and I had friends, and my friends aren't even like the bullied kids. They were just like the kids who were just like left alone, but also didn't bully anyone. So I don't know, sorry, but I don't know what your experience was, and maybe you're gonna tell me, Bruno, fuck you, that was my experience.
I sort of ended up in a corner with all the various different weirdos, freaks and nerds, though we had a guy who sounds a lot like you were in our gaming group. He was very physical. He was always getting into fights. He was fucking crazy. But he loved to game, even though he wasn't very good at maths or English. And being in the games really helped him with his maths and English. So, yeah, and we had a crazy guy with us who would keep the bullies away. So that was pretty good.
There you go. You need a crazy guy in a group. You need someone to do crazy stuff. It's like this thing, like my previous job before my current one. I got those comments like, Bruno, why do you like to go to the gym and, like, you punch each other and you choke each other? What's the deal with that? That's weird. And then, like, this girl from work who I talk to, but I'm never the first person she comes to say hi to, suddenly comes to see me one morning. Man, I wish you had been there this morning. What happened? In the subway, there was this crazy guy, and I thought, like, oh, if only Bruno was there. And I'm thinking, okay, so maybe I have a point here. Maybe there's a role to my kind of weirdness, you know.
Yeah.
When people suddenly remember me in certain key moments. So maybe
The absent
uh,
paladin.
yeah, I guess. You know, um, paladins in I know we probably have to go soon because it's been an hour, but paladins in D&D as tabletop role players, and people follow my show must be like, what am I following this guy for? He's talking about combat sports, talking about D&D. Like, talk to writers and politicians. Like, well, what's going on here? What I don't know all this stuff. Like, but it's my show. I do what I want. That's why I'll probably keep having very few views. But what I
Keep
find
at
interesting
it.
about paladins in D&D is that to make them interesting to people, they had to, in the current iteration of the official game, 5th edition, because I play another one called Castles and Crusades, which is not an official D&D, but it's, in my opinion, a much better D&D. But in 5th edition right now, the paladin doesn't have to have a code anymore. Can be a paladin of freedom, of tyranny. So you no longer have to be this lawful good character. And I find it interesting the whole thing that, however, everyone's comfortable with the Jedi in Star Wars having this code, and everyone wants to play the Jedi when they play tabletop role-playing games in Star Wars. And I wonder why that is, because the Paladin is basically a Jedi, right?
I think Jedi are a little bit more loosey-goosey if you look at what they do in the films. Some of what they do is definitely, yeah. Qui-Gon Jinn and Sam Jackson's character, whose name escapes me momentarily.
Mace Windu.
Mace Windu. He's a bit, yeah. And
well,
then there's
not
the
in
great
the movies. If you the expanded universe, what happened is because he was played by Samuel Jackson, everyone was influenced by that for the expanded universe. I don't know how Disney Star Wars canon is. I don't know how he was in Clone Wars, but everyone wanted him to be a certain way because it was Sam Jackson.
Yeah.
But in the movies, he acted like a normal Jedi. I don't know about the.
But I think Jedi tend to be a bit more chaotic good than lawful good. Really,
I would say they're neutral good though. Neutral.
yeah.
Because but
there's the gray Jedi. They'd be neutral.
Yeah. I didn't like the concept of gray Jedi. But I think neutral good is like the proper alignment for a Jedi. But my point is still, putting aside a neutral or lawful, there's a strict code of conduct, which is why people didn't want to play paladins a lot in the past. I mean, back in the day when people were, but I mean, anyway, like, because paladin used to be this really good class in older editions, but you had to roll randomly the ability scores, which would allow you to. So you couldn't just decide to grab a paladin. So if you had the ability scores for it, you were allowed to decide, oh, I can play a paladin, which is before my time. I'm just aware of this, but that was before my time.
And you had to play it tight if you wanted to keep all the special abilities and so on. But they were also huge stick in the muds and difficult to have in your adventuring party. If you've got a paladin and a rogue in the same party, it doesn't go that well. It's funny, but it's really disruptive for your goals. It's like on Tabletopless at the moment, we're playing Vampire the Masquerade on the first week of the month, and a one player has really grasped the point of the Camarilla and the Masquerade. The other players are just chaotic. Anything will happen. So it's really frustrating in a way for that player to constantly be cleaning up their messes.
So James, you're telling me that once a month, the first week of the month, once a month, with your female players, there's something very blood themed, right?
Yes. That's
I'm a classy guy like that. I'm classy like that. I just made that joke.
Yeah, it's actually really tricky because there's lots of rules on these sites about what you can and can't show, and blood is right up there. We try and make it obvious that it's fake, but yes, you're making a period joke.
Ladies, I'm sorry.
Maybe we should be playing werewolf, lunar cycles, and all that. I've got about another 20 minutes, so.
Okay, I actually got less than you, but I can still go for a while, because let's talk about Tabletopless. That's actually something interesting that you do, and which I don't watch, but it's an interesting thing that you do. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, well, I never really quite know what people want to ask, though everyone seems very interested. We play.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so we play a tabletop game. And we play it properly but it's got adult themes and everything.
Mhm.
I would say it's even a more, apart from the nudity, it's probably more realistic than Critical Role as to what an actual tabletop session is normally like.
Yeah. I wouldn't be
People
surprised. Knowing
people
you.
tip
Yeah.
people tip the players, not me, fortunately, to do various naughty things, and we work that into the narrative. But it's a lot of fun. Even though
You're
I
the
have
one doing a lot of heavy lifting mentally, because you have to be like, how do I work this in?
yeah, and
I didn't know
people
that aspect
think,
of it, actually. Yeah.
yeah, people think it's, oh, you get to play with naked girls all the time. That must be great. It's actually quite difficult because it is very distracting, and I have to not look at the sexy stuff going on, otherwise I lose my train of thought. But
that's what the sunglasses are for.
Partly, yeah. But I've always been interested in adult topics, always been supportive of sex workers and porn workers and so on. And so getting to play an adult game is just something I've always wanted, always liked. So yeah, I understand why people laugh, but we have a really good time as a game.
I don't laugh. I think it's cool. Like, it's another thing to do with the hobby. Although it's kind of funny now that you mentioned, like, I didn't know about the tip structure and that aspect where you had to kind of bring up this stuff in the game.
Yeah, work it in. Yeah.
But it's kind of funny how you say, like, you're kind of like ignoring the tips, and it's like it's kind of like you're the ignored GM, which is very much the role of the GM, I guess. Like, always always the butt of the situation, never the one fully having fun. Like, always the one spending more money or not getting as much money.
So yeah, while all this stuff is going on, I'm looking through to the next encounter and making notes. So trying to keep busy.
Oh my god, that's really how'd that come up, by the way? How'd that get started? Like, who had the idea? Yeah.
So I knew Anna Cherry, who is the sort of main lead on the whole thing. I knew her from campaigning on men's issues, and she's got, like, I think it's psychology degree or something, and she's also heavily into STEM, and her partner is heavily into STEM. So it's like, person who works in porn talking about interesting psychological stuff and technological stuff and men's issues, which I'm interested in. So I've known her for years.
STEM,
science, technology,
stem cells and such, or
no, science, technology, something, and maths. So technical subjects. Yeah. So I knew her from all that. She'd previously tried to get Tabletop Plus going, and then had a falling out with some of the other people that were involved, and suddenly needed a new games master. And I just offered, because I thought, oh no, my friend's in trouble, I'll try and help out. And it's just worked. So
it's her show, and you're kind of like the GM she has on board.
Yeah. There's a few other adult shows out there, but I don't think any of them are as big as ours or as
faithful to the game, I guess you would say.
Yeah, professional.
Okay.
It's not quite the right word, but
well, some people play D&D without taking it very seriously. Or any other tabletop role playing.
Yeah.
They kind of like, isn't this whimsical? And they don't. Really
when I say take it seriously, I mean we have fun, we laugh, we go off on tangents. That's why I say it's like a real game, right? But I take the craft of the game seriously. So I put as much effort into the Tabletop Plus games as I would any other campaign or anything that I write.
That's why I meant that a lot of people play very casually.
Yeah.
Look, nothing wrong with that, but it's like me personally, as a
we had a bit of a problem for a while because some of the people watching didn't want to tip because they didn't want to interrupt the story.
Oh my god! Does anyone tip for like when a 20 critical? Like, is there like a rule?
We allow people to tip to reroll dice, and
okay, that's nice.
And to introduce random elements and so on. So yeah, you can actually influence the story. We call the tippers our chaos gods.
You should make like really difficult encounters on nights where you need to up the tips.
Up the intake.
Like,
So get
lots of
rerolls.
And then when you notice everyone's broke, it's like, okay, the monster runs away.
But
all of a sudden.
yeah. But really, honestly, it's been a really great experience. I think we must be going a couple of years by now, doing it.
Really? Didn't know it was that long.
It must be. It's. I know it's over 1 year at least. Yeah, and it's been like a dream project for me because I've always been interested in, and I've always wondered why games don't tackle romance and sexuality and so on. I mean, I understand why not every table is going into X-rated descriptions and so on, but sexuality and romance is such a huge driver of humanity. You know, it's almost like our chief overriding thing that inspires us to do other things, or is intimately entangled with everything that we do. You know,
but it's one thing to watching a movie from the outside experience, your safe experience of watching a movie, and the other thing is to put yourself there. And I think for a lot of people, it's gonna feel awkward because they have to portray something that maybe the person they're playing with, they don't feel that way. Or maybe they feel too much that way, you know, like, or, you know, so it's like, I think it gets messy when you're asking people to portray stuff with each other and they don't even have the detachment of an actor reading a script, you know, like,
I think it's easier when you're portraying that kind of affectional romance between PCs and NPCs.
It's true because I have and I would never, it's kind of funny this is my own, I'm not saying it's a moral thing, it's just what makes me comfortable. As a married man, I would never portray romance in a recorded game that I would put online. But with my friends, I do that all the time. Like, you know, I portray NPCs and all that, and my group is very varied, and, you know, I portray lots of different characters, and that's never been an issue. But there's at the same time, we don't really like, you know, it's not like we're going to spend 15 minutes portraying a date or something. We don't do that. But and actually what's interesting is like 2 players took it upon themselves to have that kind of storyline between them, and they're really not, you know, they don't have anything going on between themselves. But it's true. I think as a GM, because you play so many characters, any character you play is not personalized. It's not like it doesn't feel like it's yours, so you have this detachment again. And even people like interacting with you know that in a moment like right now you might be the you know, the sexy male bartender, but in the next scene you're gonna be the short goblin, like eating mule feces or something. I don't know.
The short, sexy goblin eating mule feces. But yeah, that's easier. I haven't seen it so much in tabletop, but in live action roleplay, certainly people would attempt to roleplay romance as a way of kind of testing the waters. You know, are you attracted to me? Can I maybe ask you that in real life? Yeah, it was awkward, but I was the storyteller in those things as well, so I was kind of set apart from that, and you kind of watch it happening. You're like it's not on me to interfere, but I can see what's happening.
I've done some LARP. I feel like that could have been a tangent. We kind of have to stop now, but
another
as
time.
always, I could have. Yeah, if you want, I'll bring you back because we could talk for hours. I'm sure, if not for schedules and such. Go back to writing Whitechester. I won my book, James.
But you'll get a possibly nearly complete draft by the end of this month.
Really? Okay. I struggle reading on a computer, so I might browse it. I don't think I'll actually read it until I have the physical copy.
But you'll be able to get an idea.
Yes. I'll be looking at it, and I'll be like, soon. Yeah. Well, okay, James. Listen, thank you very much for your time, and you're always welcome back. Even though, you know, like we struggle to find things to talk about, you and I think we can manage another episode. So much there between the 2 of us. We certainly don't like the sounds of our voices.
All right.
Okay, man. Thank you very much.
See you soon. Bye.